Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Welcome back once again to Fighting on Film, everybody. This week, it's another one of our Patreon voted movies. Every month, we're going to be asking them to choose a film for us. So this month, we put the vote to some modern warfare films, and they voted for 2020's The Outpost.
So I wanted to do a modern film because over the last month, we've heard that the drawdown in Afghanistan is going to finally come to an end. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to look back on that with a film about Afghanistan. So we put up 3 or 4 choices: a British film, Canadian film, a couple of American movies, and The Outpost won out. And it's a movie all about the Battle of Kamdesh in 2009.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say it's possibly the best modern warfare film that you can currently watch. I'd go that far.
That's a big
yeah,
it's a big claim.
Well, yeah, I love 13 Hours. I like The Patrol. Yeah. I watched every one of these films we put up in anticipation of the vote. The Outpost is just, it has something. It just at its heart, it has something there. And I'm sure we'll get into it as we go along, but there's a lot of heart in this movie that I think is missing from modern movies.
It's extremely well done.
Yeah. I know that the director went to West Point and served, so he's bringing in his memories. You've got loads of testimony and loads of actual combat footage from either side of the battle itself, and you can just create this amazing narrative from the real information and the real history. It's almost a verbatim piece film, and listening to Ty's testimonies, like the words that he says in interviews are pretty much the words that are on the script.
Yeah.
In the script. So it's, sorry to jump in there, but it is just a remarkable film. It's
really interesting too, in that there's a few people that were present in the movie. So we have this, it's something that happened more frequently, in the heyday of Hollywood war movies, so with... Exactly. We've mentioned before Battleground and that kind of thing. And obviously...
Days to Glory, things like that.
Again, this is that sort of ilk, where we've got 3 guys that were present either at the battle or at the actual outpost itself. And as you said, it also draws on all of those experiences. And there's some behind-the-scenes documentary stuff where, some of the guys that were there are interviewed and spoken to.
Yeah.
And you can see where the production team have drawn all of their sources from.
But we must mention it's Daniel Rodriguez. He plays himself. He had Henry Hughes, Brad Larson, who he played.
Yeah, he's got quite a big part, hasn't he?
Yeah. And then Ty Carter, who won the Medal of Honor, has a brief cameo, but he in the movie is played by Caleb Landry Jones. And we should transition into the cast now, I think. So, Matt.
Yeah, so we have, it's quite an interesting cast, actually. You've got people like Orlando Bloom, Milo Gibson, Scott Eastwood, as you mentioned, Caleb Landry Jones, and we even have an Attenborough in there. Will Attenborough is in there too.
It seems, is this the new sort of trope? Is this the new fighting on film trope? We always find a link back to A Bridge Too Far.
Maybe. A
Dickie Attenborough link. It's like the Sons, isn't it?
They've all been in, war movies and that sort of thing. So Gibson was in both Hurricane and Hacksaw Ridge. Orlando Bloom was famously in Black Hawk Down, which I think was one of his earliest movies. Actually.
And Lord of the Rings, come on.
Yeah, well, okay, that is a kind of war movie. Scott Eastwood was in Fury and Flags of Our Fathers. Caleb Landry Jones, I don't think has actually been in any war movies, but he's been pure money in a lot of films recently.
Yeah, he's big boy.
Very good character actor, I think. Plays slightly disturbed really well.
Yeah, he did. He recently was in Get Out, wasn't he?
3 Billboards. Yeah. And then Will Attenborough, who isn't a major actor in this, but he was in Dunkirk and the BBC Afghan series Our Girl as well.
Yes, he was.
So worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It's a strong cast.
Yeah, I was struck by it.
It's a strong cast. No one's, other than Bloom, who plays Captain Keating, who dies relatively early in the film, not in combat. We'll come back to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But other than him, I suppose Scott Eastwood is the most famous person in the movie, and he plays Clint Ramesha, who also was awarded the Medal of Honor for this battle, and wrote his own book, Red Platoon.
Red Platoon. Yeah, we got some
Yeah,
questions from the patrons later, and I think that pops up.
Yeah, so he wrote his own book, and the movie itself, worth noting, is based on Jake Tapper's book, The Outpost, The Untold Story of American Valor. Tapper is a CNN journalist and did a lot of work on, obviously, Afghanistan and the war in general. It's a really interesting production. We've got quite a strong cast, and I think it was filmed in 2018-19.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
So it might be before some of Landry Jones's like bigger, more prominent roles, possibly, or just around the same time.
He's definitely hit career started hitting at a perfect time for when this movie's come out. So another thing we should quickly mention before we go in deeper, this movie is a complete COVID sleeper hit. So it was meant to premiere at South by Southwest Film Festival, and obviously that didn't happen. So it went straight to VOD, video on demand. Over here, we got it in the UK, I think a month ago in June.
I've been waiting for it for a long time, it seems. It feels like, because if you remember, we actually talked about this on a show and tell.
Yes, we did.
Months and months ago. You'd watched it.
Yeah.
Highly rated it. I hadn't seen it because I didn't have Prime or whatever it was on at that point. And now it's on Prime.
Yeah.
Finally got around to watching it. Wasn't disappointed.
I mean, as I said at the start of the episode, it's just a fantastic movie. It's so good. And I think it's just a shame that the movie didn't get a cinematic release, but there just has been a director's cut Blu-ray version with 12 extra minutes of footage. Production-wise, so it's directed by Rod Lurie. So he's an ex-US Army officer, as we said. He went to West Point, graduated, but he directed the movie The Contender with Gary Oldman, came out in the early thousands. He also did The Last Castle with Robert Redford. So the guy's got pedigree.
That is a film I mentioned when we talked about The Hill.
Yeah.
Robert Redford, James Gandolfini, and Mark Ruffalo.
Mm-hmm.
It's a military prison, and it's kind of like an uprising / siege. So he knows how to do action. He's coming onto this movie off the back of a Straw Dogs remake that bombed.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
There's quite a gap between films, it seems. But this is really well directed, I think.
Yeah, it's solid. It's a solid picture. There's lull, but it's for a reason. Everything is tight. Everything means something.
It's well paced.
I know you looked up the cinematographer, and I think it's a English-born Italian, Lorenzo
Senatore.
That's the one. Yeah.
Or Senatore.
Yeah, so he worked on he was second unit on like 300 Rise of an Empire and Spectre.
Don't forget London Has Fallen and Wonder Woman.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, lots of action flicks. Yes. And it shows.
Yeah.
It
So
really
he's
shows.
a very experienced cinematographer. And we'll talk about it later on, but there's some gorgeous cinematography, some really
Absolutely
nice
beautiful
shots in this.
For me, one of the shots that stands out is where Ty's got the stretcher and he's trying to get to Mace.
Mm-hmm.
And they must have had either a cameraman so close up to him or attached the camera to the end of the stretcher. And he runs the gauntlet back to Elras 2. You just see him sort of dodging incoming fire and just
bouncing off of things and stumbling. And when you combine that cinematography, the editing, that sound design, the practical effects of those, the RPGs coming in, it's very effective. Really kinetic, very effective. It's got that sort of chaotic flow to it.
Yeah. It was only made for $5 million.
Which is insane.
Which is absolutely incredible. As we record it, so it's on about 2.2 million revenue, but obviously with COVID, that's really relevant.
Who knows with the video on demand stuff? They never really release it anymore.
Yeah.
And you never really know with budget either, but I believe it was filmed in Bulgaria.
Yeah, filmed in Bulgaria. And it's just perfect. I mean, I've seen photos of Keating.
I mean, I haven't been to Afghanistan, but it's very effective. From looking at photographs and videos from Camp Keating, definitely looks. I mean, they even got the river.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of context. Outpost Keating, or Cop Keating, was based in the bottom of a very deep valley.
Yeah.
With mountains on all sides and a river that sort of flowed around its edge.
So you're penned in anywhere you go, aren't you?
Yeah, very imposing landscape. Hilly, very difficult to fight in. How they managed to get a location like that in Bulgaria is very impressive.
They must have just found the perfect valley, the perfect place, because I think we should transition into plot, really, talking about Keating itself. But that opening sequence, they come in by helicopter at night. You establish the main cast. You've got Scott Eastwood. I think he's going back. His character, Roe, I think is he going back into the base?
I don't know. I know he's a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan already, and I know he'd spoken from interviews with Ramesha himself.
Well, he knew people there, didn't he?
Yeah, so maybe he'd spoken to someone who'd been there previously, and they told him what a death trap it was.
Okay, so maybe he just had knowledge going in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'd been there before. I don't know, but
there's banter on the helicopter. They say, why are we going in at night? So, well, they're saying the only way the pilots will fly in, So you're like, okay,
it's safer.
It's pretty hot around here. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the actual battle or the outpost itself, you've got no idea. And then shows the lads getting to their billet. Then it cuts
all at night still.
Yeah, and then it cuts to them walking through the compound, and the way it's shot, it looks like there could be like a little ridge line behind them. You don't really think anything of it.
Yeah.
And then the camera pans up, and you get that fabulous sweeping shot.
They come out of the Sangha.
Yeah.
The morning after they stumble out, and we get this really nice close up of Scott Eastwood's face.
Yeah, his character's called Clint, isn't it? Clint Ramesha.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you get that beautiful pan shot, don't you? It sort of like spins around the valley, and it just pans up a little, and you see the peaks of these, I guess, mountains you could call them. They're very steep hills, but these ridge lines and mountains above, and you just think, damn.
The sense of claustrophobia that gives off, and then you. Later on in the film, and we're jumping ahead, but it makes sense. Later on in the film, they patrol up on the ridgeline, the American soldiers, and Scott Clint gives his rundown, his playbook of how he would take out the base, and you just see how isolated they are. And there's a picture up on the Wikipedia of Keating, but it's shot for shot. It's almost shot for shot, and it's mind-boggling how these.
And that's great. That's a great establishing shot, because it's showing you the layout of the compound. It's showing you the mortar pit, because he literally goes, I take out the mortar pit, and then I take out the ammo dump, and then I take out the CP.
Take out the LRASs, just shows
all the major points that you're going to see in the firefight that makes up the third act.
Yeah.
So that's really good sort of
foreshadowing,
expositional cinema making, filmmaking rather. And
then we should also say that it isn't just a straight action film. There is a lot. So I timestamps it here. The actual action, the battle itself, starts at the 55-minute mark, roughly.
Yeah.
And the movie's about 2 hours long, but you get this beautiful hour where you're just learning who everyone is, how it works, the situation, how the American infantry or the American unit there are trying to build relationships with the local Afghani people. And the sort of how that is escalating, and they don't know if they're the enemy or not. And then you get the little sort of, I'd say it's like dark humor, where the CO gets changed. So unfortunately, Keating, played by Orlando Bloom, he is killed in a freak vehicle accident. They've got this big truck called the Beast, and it unfortunately falls off one of the ridge lines, and it unfortunately kills the men on board. And then after that, you get a new CO who is scared of going out. He pees in bottles.
Yeah, so you got Milo Gibson first, who that scene is so interesting when he is actually killed.
He's blown up by an IED, isn't he, on the bridge?
Yeah, he is. They're crossing a bridge, and there's a really great bit where the Afghan interpreter that is with the patrol is listening into local radio chatter. And he says they're talking about something about scarves, and he doesn't know the local dialect. Milo Gibson's character, what's his name?
Ulysses Cass. We're probably butchering that, sorry.
Yeah. And he's like, Jesus, he doesn't even speak the local dialect. And I was reading somewhere that the scarves that they're talking about is the scarf that he's wearing.
Oh.
So it's the Taliban saying he's the officer, when he gets to the IED, that's when you should set it off.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which didn't initially click with me on my first watch, but I saw some mention of it online. And then when I watched the film again, I was like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that adds a lot of weight to that scene now. If you hadn't have said that, I would have thought it was just an unfortunate event.
It's very clever.
Wow.
It easily missed.
Gosh.
So the film breaks up sort of sections into the commanders. So it starts with Keating. Then there's Broward, who is the CO that's an Iraq veteran.
That's it.
And he won't leave the CP, and he's peeing in bottles and making the men take him out to bed.
And he's very down the line, isn't he? You see a weapon, then you can remember the rules of engagement. He's very much by the numbers.
Exactly. He doesn't want to take any chances.
No.
He just wants to go home.
But yet, in his own way, I'm not sure if what happened actually happened or if it's narrative. I haven't had time to read Jake's book, I'm afraid. Answering one of the Patreon questions earlier there. But that a dog bites one of the local Afghan, I think, leaders or...
Yeah, one of the local tribal elders.
Yeah.
He gets bitten and he sort of thinks it's a bad omen.
The CO just comes out and shoots the dog in the head. And then it sort of... There's a shift in the soundtrack there. There's a little... Everyone's looking at each other. And it's like, okay, now it's more serious. It
kind of slips, doesn't it? So Keating is shown as this very capable officer, knows a little bit of Pashto, is speaking to the tribal elders. He knows what to say. Don't make me fight you. Work with me.
Yeah. So we should quickly add that Orlando Bloom is money in this. He's great, selling his character. Yeah. Sorry, please continue.
He makes you like the character.
He's got that cheeky vibe going on as well.
Yeah. And he's playing this very capable, likable, affable troop commander. And the scale sort of slides on the capabilities of these commanding officers. So Bloom's very capable. Gibson's character is capable, but thrown in the deep end. He's doing the right thing. And then you've got Captain Broward, who is played by Kwame Patterson. And he's obviously, as we've said, he's the Iraq veteran who's taking it very by the book and doesn't want to take any risks. And the situation deteriorates.
It's just to show how command is perceived by different men, I think, as well. And
it's different styles.
Yeah, and that must come from using Ty's own recollections and memoirs of the event. So maybe, that's how the guy was, I assume.
Well,
that's how he
he's
was.
shown taking those balls of piss out of the CP, isn't he? Like day after day. And he's just like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? And then we end up with the second in command, Lieutenant Andrew Bunderman, who is sort of like the junior officer to everyone from Keating downwards.
And he's thrown in. He's thrown into the...
Yeah, he is. And he's played by Taylor John Smith. It just shows that it sort of just goes to hell in a handbasket slowly.
Yeah.
And that base has no reason to be there. And they know that, but they can't close it down.
Even in the official US Army report, they pretty much said, didn't they?
It's got no strategic or tactical value.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's supposed to be like an outreach post where they do hearts and minds and a little bit of counterinsurgency. They're in that much of a precarious position. They end up just literally just defending the outpost. That's their main task.
I know we're going to get into the action in favourite scenes and in the alley tally, so I think we should move on to the alley tally this week.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
You're the firearms expert, Matt, so I think you should go first.
There's lots in this film. There's some really interesting stuff, actually, and it's not all like what you would expect. So my favorite kit from the film is the copious amount of M240 machine gun action there is.
A heck ton, isn't there?
There is a hell of a lot in there.
Yeah.
It's great to see because a lot of films, it's just M4s and M249s. Like the M249s, the light machine gun, the 5.56 light machine gun, and then the M240 is the FN mag. It's the general purpose machine gun that most NATO powers adopted in some shape or form. And the M240s in this movie are really interesting because they're all mounted on either pedestal mounts, either in the mortar pit or one of the LRAS positions, or they're running around firing them from bipods. So there's loads of great action in there.
I can't let you continue without saying that the mortar pit by the mortar crew is called Mortar Eaterville.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's possibly the greatest name for a mortar emplacement that I have ever heard. But Matt, continue. Just wanted to get that in there quick.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, there's a 120 millimeter mortar pit, and
Yep.
one of the M240 positions is in there. And when the battle kicks off, they all run to the pit to try and get the mortars up, but then they can't, because the Taliban have scoped out Camp Keating for months. They know
Yep.
exactly where everything is. There's even a great little scene where one of the guys is grabbed taking photographs inside the camp.
That's it. Yeah, that's when it starts to turn, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the Taliban, they know where everything is, and that mortar pit is under heavy machine gun and RPG fire, and they just can't get that mortar in action, because
if you seek out the actual footage that the Taliban shot themselves during the battle on October 3rd, you can see the isolation, and you can see them, aiming their recoilless rifles and their RPGs at, LRAS-2 and the mortar pits. So
yeah, well, the mortar is shown, from the beginning of the film onwards. There's sort of sporadic bits where the camp is attacked, and the report that you mentioned earlier, Rob, mentions that they were attacked like 47 times in 5 months.
Yeah.
So they're being attacked like once a month, once a week, rather.
Yeah, once a week. Yeah,
something like that. And it's kind of shown in the movie. There's a little bit of time compressing where it seems like they're almost being attacked every day.
Yeah.
But the mortar is shown as being their main way of hitting the enemy at range at a certain position within the valley that they can't reach with small arms.
Because as Orlando Bloom says, hit him with Willie Pete, give him some phosphorus. So, that's their heavy weapon, isn't it? And yeah, as you say, it is nice to see those fixed. I mean, everyone loves a fixed MG. And you get some really nice shots of lads blasting away with MGs. And it's also refreshing just to see the Americanized version of a European weapon that we all sort of know the look of.
Yeah. They have that sort of characteristic handguard that's sort of like a clamshell.
Got that shroud, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a scene where it's like hanging off on one of them, which is cool.
Yeah, it looks good.
It's really interesting to see, obviously, because it was such a pivotal part of what Tyler Carter did during the battle.
Yep.
He was an ammunition runner. And it's really interesting to see that sort of logistical side of things.
Exactly.
They're running ammunition to the various places. And at one point, LRAS-2, which has 50 caliber Browning in the actual Humvee.
And an up-armored Hummer, yeah.
Yeah. And then the 240 is sort of on a pintle mount outside the vehicle, sandbagged. The 240 goes down because it's hit by small arms fire. And then the 50 cal goes down, hit by what looks like an RPG round.
It's hit by an RPG, yeah. I think from what I read, I think it was hit like pretty much front on.
Carter, played by Landry Jones, he's running ammunition to them, and he's bringing them ammunition. But by the time the ammunition arrives, he's brought them 50 cal when the 240 needed 7.62. And when he comes back with 7.62 and 50 cal,
they don't need
both of the weapons are down. So they don't need it. He's stuck in there, and what they all really need is 5.56.
Yeah, and because they go, have you got any 5.6? And he just goes, yeah, here you go. And he throws them some mags out of his own chest rig. But that scene you mentioned where Ty's running with the ammunition, that harkens back to the start of the movie, and it comes full circle, because at the start of the film, there's a small firefight, but he just takes too long.
Yeah, the firefight's over by the time he gets back.
Yeah, the firefight's over, and then he gets chewed out by his CO.
By Larson, who's played by Henry Hughes, who is veteran of Camp Keating, and he's really good.
Yeah,
we're off a bit of a side tangent, but
no, but it's
Henry Hughes is really good. He's a great actor in this. Very believable.
And I think that's what. And as we said before, movies like There's Is and things like that with the actual guys in it, they always just have something more. They have something more to give, because you're not just getting men who've read a script or gone to a boot camp. These men have done it for a job. You get to see that on screen, and it just adds another layer of authenticity to the film.
So my other pick, there's a few things I'm probably going to mention as we go on, but there's one of my favorite things in not just an alley sort of aspect, but also a cinematography aspect, is the use of the ACOG sights on all the rifles.
Oh yes, yeah.
The reticle's correct, and we get this use. It's a classic war movie sort of technique of down the sights, and we get lots of these little intercut bits where one of the characters brings up his rifle and he looks through the ACOG, which is a a telescopic optic, if you don't know what an ACOG is, made by Chichicom. It's one of the classics, and it's going to be forever sort of synonymous with the war on
Call
terror.
of Duty or anything like
Exactly.
that. You know what it looks like.
If you play any of those games, you'll have seen one. But yeah, they bring up their rifles and they're looking through these, and it brings the Taliban to you. So you can see the enemy positions, and it's a really nice thing because up until that point, they're just like little flashes on the ridgeline.
Yeah.
And little bits of smoke and dust. And then obviously you see the fight like when it arrives, but you don't see where it's coming from so much. But the use of the through the sights cinematography and these shots sort of brings the enemy to you, and you can see what the soldiers see, which I like a lot. And they use it really, really well. It's very effective, I thought.
No, it is.
But it's on almost all the M4s, which is basically the ubiquitous weapon of the movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Everyone seems armed with one. I was going to ask you a quick question, and I don't know if you can answer off the cuff, Matt. Sorry to put you on the spot. But is there a reason why there's no M16, like is it A2s now, or is there a reason for that? Or
yeah, well, they'd been sort of replaced by M4A1s by this point. So the Marine Corps held on to them a little bit longer because they like the extra barrel length.
Sure.
But by this point in the war, it was predominantly M4A1s. Okay.
Yeah, so everyone seems to be armed with one in the movie pretty much. Clint Ramesh's one has a little laser guide on it. Some lads have forward grips, some don't. There's a little bit of level of like personal choice there with some of the weapons.
The only time I saw one of those PEC 15s, the laser module you mentioned being used is Landry Jones when he looks down at Orlando Bloom.
Yes, that's a nice, and the green laser through the night sky. It's really nice use of that. But for me, it sort of goes in with M4 chat. What my first alley pick is one, I think it's really, really respectful and commendable. The movie chooses and does quite rightly portray the two Latvian operational mentor liaison team members.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit. One the character is called, who you see in the movie. There was two chaps, but the one he played by Alexander Alexiev, and he portrays Latvian Army First Sergeant Yanis Latkis, and it's a great little sequence. They introduce him, and he's training up the Afghan army regulars, bit of extra firepower for the base, and he's introduced, and they make sort of like a little joke about him, about something about suck.
Embrace the suck. Yeah, and Milo Gibson says embrace the suck, and he doesn't know what the hell I mean.
What the suck? It's really funny, and you think, oh, okay, that's your little that's your inclusion there. Might not see him again, because I thought when the action started, I was like, I wonder what happened to the Latvian chap. And he ends up with Ramesha as they start to retake the compound later on in that sequence. Yeah. But he's with him, covering
it's like by the front gate, isn't it? Where some Taliban dressed as A&A come in.
That's it, yeah. And they're acting like, so Clint looks at them through his sights and goes, "Oh, they're acting
great use of that ACOG, yeah."
Yeah, they're acting like the battle's already won. They're wearing captured helmets, and one of them's got like a backpack full of RPG rounds, and Clint opens up on them with his M4, and they rush back behind the Humvee, and he says, hit him with the 203. So the Latvian soldier just. It's the only time you ever see a 203 used in the film, but it's
and Ramesha has one. He had one on his rifle, so he could have done it, but I guess he just wanted the Latvian guy to have it.
It's a crack shot, and I read a great article today. You can find it on the Wikipedia about the Latvian soldiers, and they met back up with their American counterparts from the battle, and it's just really nice to see it. So I really think that was great representation.
He did win a Latvian Gallantry Award, didn't he, as well?
Yeah, oh God, we should mention, I've written it down, we should mention all the awards that were awarded. This battle had 27 Purple Hearts awarded, 37 Army Commendation Medals, 3 Bronze Stars, 9 Silver Stars, 2 DSCs, and 2 Medal of Honors.
Which makes it's Bravo Troop 3rd Squadron 61st Cavalry.
Right.
Which makes them the most decorated unit of the war in Afghanistan.
It's absolutely incredible. You really get a sense of how they earned them. So my second alley pick is...
Before we jump off, I wondered, it's quite interesting that the Latvian guys don't have G36s. I wonder why
You
they
said
didn't.
that. Yeah, you met in the WhatsApp.
I did try and look up to see if see the reason, but I guess either the Bulgarian film unit didn't have one available, or in reality, those guys that were embedded just swapped out for M4s.
Yeah, possibly. Because you're using, you'd use the weapon that you'd have the most. I mean, are the mags interchangeable on it?
No.
Maybe
they're
that's
not. So
maybe
I think the
why.
Latvian G36s use the proprietary HK mags, so that would make complete sense that they would just be using M4s.
Especially where you are. It might be tough.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a great spot, Matt. Apparently he's wearing Chinese camo because the Latvian camouflage is hard to
apparently
find.
it's hard to come by. I did read that too. Yeah,
it's interesting,
isn't it?
We use the same websites, you see.
Like Chinese digital camo. We really should speak about these things before the show.
It doesn't matter. Keep it in. So yeah, my second alley pick is, I just like the character of Rodriguez because I think playing yourself is ballsy.
Cool, isn't it? It's interesting.
And especially in a battle that you've only fought, it's 11 years ago now, but still very fresh. I think probably fresh in the memory. But he plays it, plays himself with ease. It's a silly thing to say.
Well, it must be hard to get back into that sort of role and mindset, mustn't it?
Exactly. And I think he does a fantastic job, and he gets his moment. He gets a few moments actually. But I like the part where the action's just started, and Rodriguez, he's wearing a t-shirt, he's got his chest rig on, he's got army athletic shorts on, and his boots and a helmet. So they're all caught off guard. A lot of the lads you see running around with shorts and
it's early morning, isn't it, when the attack starts?
Everyone's either gone for a run or they're just they're going to get washed or something.
Yeah.
So he opens the door of the little billet that he's in, and he cocks an M9 Beretta, and he says, "Just another fucking day in Afghanistan," and he starts running to Mortarita. I was sitting there thinking, he grabbed the pistol. He's got a pistol, and I think, it might be the only thing he had on him at the time.
Yeah,
but it's sort of that. I think it's that brain moment. Your brain goes into gear. You think it might not be an M4, it might not be a Mardeus or a cannon, but it's something to shoot back with. And it's just there's some just great scenes of him blatting away with this M9, trying to get to Mortaritaville, and it's just I just love it.
Yeah, because he gets to the pit, doesn't he? And he's sort of like he's shouting for Thompson, I think it is, and he empties a mag out, and then he spots Thompson.
And then he gets on the MG and starts giving it.
That's a great scene because he sort of pulls off that tarp.
Yeah.
And he just opens up on the ridgeline. It's great.
But he does his best to try and get him in, and then you get Rodriguez is covered with dirt and stuff, and he gets pulled. I think
it is Thompson. Yeah, it's Thompson's. Thompson's the first person that's called out over the radio as KIA. That must have been a hard thing to recreate.
Yeah, exactly. And it's done so well. And it's another layer of authenticity, another layer of realism. I think Rodriguez absolutely smashes it, really.
Jumping off briefly on M9 banter, I think we shout out to Orlando Bloom's M9 in his chest rig.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah.
Did
notice that. I was like, he's the only guy that seems to have that setup.
And he gets a really cool sort of action movie quip where he's trying to settle all the lads down for a briefing, and he taps his captain's...
his bars,
his bars, and he goes, "Is this thing on? Can you hear me, guys? Is this thing on?" It's a great little line. Brilliant little line.
Yeah, that reminded me a lot of Black Hawk Down. Some of the the moments in the hangar where they're like doing a briefing and stuff. Yeah.
The digital camo is nice to see.
Yeah, I was about to mention that
this is a long alley tally.
The universal camouflage pattern, the UCP,
really nice.
Sort of so interesting because it sort of captures that period of the war. Now, it's a 20-year war, starting in 2001.
Yeah.
People joke that it's the forever war, and Jesus, it might as well be.
I mean, it's all in our lifetime as well. I think we forget that.
It's an insanely long conflict. It's probably the longest that the US and most of the ISAF partners have been involved in ever.
Yep.
But it sort of captures this period of the war, a lot like, I guess, sort of the way that uniforms from World War II became synonymous and Vietnam became synonymous. You know, those jackets that they wore and the helmet covers. And
yeah, it's like you think of Vietnam, you think of a third pattern jacket, you think of D-Day, you think of like an American M41 jacket or something.
Yeah, 41s, yeah. And so that UCP that got replaced in about, I think it was 2015, started phasing it out for the the operational camouflage pattern that's used now.
Yep.
So yeah, that is really interesting because it becomes sort of synonymous with that phase. And as soon as you see that on screen, you think, okay, this is like mid 2000s Afghanistan.
It's interesting just the film is just in 2009. I think my brain can't comprehend something like this happened in my lifetime. It's incredible.
Well, I remember when this happened. Do you remember it?
No, I'll admit to the listeners, I was in a bit of a wilderness years in 2009. I think I was about 15.
I remember it being mentioned online and in the news. And I remember seeing some of the photographs that came out of it. With, the guys shooting up into the hills and being really struck by that.
I think at the time I was just following Luton Town very rigidly, and I don't think I deviated for a bit.
There's no Bedford in this, but there's the truck.
No, there isn't. I thought the Beast was a Bedford M5 for a bit, and it's not.
It's an LMTV, yeah.
I think that wraps up the Alley Tally for this week. So we're on to fave scenes. Now, there's an absolute smorgasbord of fantastic sequences. Matt, what did you pick this week?
There's a lot in it. I liked a lot of the scenes with the guys where there's a lot of banter. And soldier banter is difficult to get right. I'm not a soldier, never been in that position, but you know when it's wrong because it feels weirdly forced in movies. So movies that haven't got any input from actual soldiers or haven't done their due diligence to sort of root out what they want soldiers to be saying in scenes that aren't combat, you can definitely sort of pinpoint that doesn't sound right. But in this, you get that feel, you get the vibe. And there's a lot of scenes where there's a great one where one of the guys, a photograph of his wife is going around the barracks and they're all jacking off over it.
Funny.
And he pulls one guy out and he makes him drop him and do push-ups and apologize to the photograph.
And he's like, sorry, missus.
Yeah. And then he's like kisses the photograph at one point and the guy is absolutely There's lots of really interesting stuff, there's a little bit of light hazing where like two guys during the one of the evening
they're hugging each other up. Yeah,
they're hugging each other, telling each other they love each other. I think Eastwood describes it as frat sort of humor.
Yeah.
Doesn't he, at some point when he's talking to Carter.
Ty mentions, they can't really hack it. But yeah, I mean, I like all that banter. It rings true. You get the guys Ty and Mace is doing the latrines, and he's just like, this shit gives you cancer, man. He's like proper like hamming it up. This shit gives you cancer.
Yeah, this is our generation's Agent Orange.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like proper like squaddy humor, but it's just great. And the mise en scène, the set dressing as well that comes in those phases
it goes a long way to setting up you caring about the characters.
Is it Bunderman comes and he gives Ramesh a can of Dr. Pepper to have with a cigarette sitting around the campfire.
There's little bizarre bits where they've got like one of the lady tennis players' pair of panties in the medical tent. The bit where like they're waterboarding one another.
Yeah.
And
it's just, but that's you see it. Yeah, you hear tales of it. I've had friends who
it adds.
Yeah, I've had friends who served out in Ireland and things with the British Army, and they're like, you kind of obsess over a Mars bar and things like that. You obsess the little things because it gets you through, and it really makes sense. Oh, there's I think one of the Afghan soldiers comes in and I think gives one of the characters a pack of smokes. And he goes, "These aren't Camel lights."
Yeah.
It's just lovely little dialogue work. I really like it.
It's very good. So some of those scenes really stand out to me. Some of my favorite scenes from the battle sequence are that RPG hit on the 50 caliber at El Raz 2 is really well done. That overhead shot where the round comes in, there's an explosion, it knocks the gun out. I think it's Larson that's in the turret.
I think so.
And the camera sort of pans upwards into like almost horizontal as he goes back down through the hatch. Just a really beautiful shot.
Yeah, you feel every hit.
There's a few shots like that are really well done. The scene in the Shurad hut where they're meeting with the elders for the first time, it sort of does that exact same sort of panning overhead shot through the hole in the roof.
Said it. I think that's showing the isolation of Keating with camera work, but just alluding to it.
Yeah, definitely sort of that it's essentially the view that the Taliban had, looking down on
That's
the camp,
it.
isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
That's one of my favorite scenes. Another is where they start the fight back. So one of the things that Ramesh was awarded the Medal of Honor for was leading that fight back to retake the front gate and break out of the Alamo positions that they've fallen back on. And there's a great little sequence where they get a 240 up, and they're covering a ridge line, and
they're trying to take the main gate.
Exactly, and the Taliban are within like 10-15 feet at this point, which when you think about it, for Afghanistan, which is a war that is known for insurgency and hit and run tactics at very long ranges, that's probably one of the closest engagements of the war.
It has to be, yeah. You see in all the news reports and things of our lads out there. They're engaging at really long distances.
Yeah.
Usually
there's a couple in like 06 where they come like quite close.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like 07 onwards, it's, as you say, it's like long range stuff.
Yeah.
So a guy arrives on a scrambler bike and takes a couple of pot shots and then just disappears.
Yeah. Exactly. That's like the patrol. Like in the movie The Patrol, that's how they engage the enemy in that one. But yeah, and I know the scene you're talking about. It's very, that's when it sort of veers a little bit into action movie territory, but I think it's merited.
Yeah. There's the bit that I like is the bit where they drop a couple of grenades out, and it's just a very dynamic scene. But you're right. After that little bit, there's a couple little bit that become a little action movie-ish. Straight
after the dust and the debris from those two grenades has gone off, Eastwood says to the guy on the MG, he goes, right, we take the gate, we take the base back, or we take the base back and we take the gate. And he goes off, and the gunner looks at doesn't look at the camera, but looks at Ramesh as he's walking away. Goes, "Gotta love the pressure, Ro." But the thing is, there is space for that humor, because you can believe in all this madness of the firefight and the scale of the battle that men would talk to each other like that in that sense. So it's merited, I think, as well.
It's a lot of Eastwood's character that's doing it, though. So he has a couple of other lines where he's like, "Not today."
That's Clint Eastwood. You can't.
Yeah, he is an Eastwood. He's got to have some lines. Rub off on you. And he's there's a bit where the camera sort of zooms into his face for a close up, and he's like, "We're taking back this outpost."
If it wasn't said, it's for the trailer anyway, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the most tropey part, while we're just covering a couple of these little criticisms, is the bit where they've taken the gate back, but there's another wave of Taliban coming in. And he literally says, "There's too many of them." Fair enough, there is a lot of them. I think they were attacked by about 300. They're swarming over that ridgeline. And, he flicks his safety off on his M4. And he's just about to open fire when I think a couple of rockets from an Apache hit that ridgeline. And he sort of stops and he looks at his M4.
Yeah, he does that. Yeah, it's almost like the American Psycho moment where Christian Bale looks at his pistol, and when he blows up those police cars, it's that sort of thing. If it was a lesser film, these moments would piss you off more. Going into my fave scene, and as Matt did, and I probably will do, there's just so much to talk about in the movie that is good. For me, it's Ty's Medal of Honor action, or what leads up to his Medal of Honor actions. So they're all in, by the point in the movie where Ty's story is fully shown, they're in Al Ras 2. The gun's been taken out. I think it's 4 men in there, or 5 men in there. Yeah, 5. I think it's 5 men in there. So Mace, I forget all the guys' names, but they initially say, right, Mace says, right, we'll go this way. Another fella goes, we'll go the other way. You and Ty and I can't remember the chap's name, really, really sorry. They get out and give covering fire, and you see Mace and his buddy run in one direction, an RPG hits, and then you see Mace shoot forward with his M4 and then get hit himself. And Ty, obviously, in that moment, you sort of feel his emotional weight starts to come through. He starts to feel something different, because up to this point, all the men have said, "Oh, he doesn't."
He's being quite the loner, isn't he?
Yeah, a little bit of a loner. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and I think in documentaries that I watched about Ty, he would have admitted that himself. Daniel Rodriguez says there's a great Netflix episode in the Medal of Honor series about Ty, and he says, he never really interacted with us. I think he wasn't like one of the guys. Mace is injured, and Ty's really shook up by this. I think it really gets to him, and then Mace starts crawling towards the Hummer. I love the sequence. One, because I think it's really well done, and it's really good that it's immortalized what the man did.
Mm-hmm.
But two, those scenes in LRS2, they feel like a mini movie because of the way that they're shot, because they have to be inside the Hummer.
Yeah.
They feel completely disjointed from the action, but it makes perfect
I know what
sense
you
because those guys were disjointed because they had no radio contact until Ty picked up a radio when he rescued Mace.
By that point, the Taliban were inside the wire.
Yeah, exactly. So they can't, So you feel really claustrophobic. But it's just Ty getting out and Ty building up the courage to save his friend or save his comrade that really got me. Caleb's performance is really, really good. I hope that he is nominated for something from this film. Ty goes to get his friend. He puts a tourniquet on. I've researched that the actual action is pretty much verbatim what happened, I think.
Seems so. I watched a press conference he did when he was awarded the medal, and he does talk about that feeling of helplessness, of seeing Mace sort of trying to drag himself towards the Humvee, and knowing that he can't get out there and get him. And he knows that Larson is making complete sense when he says, "Don't go out there."
And then and he goes out there and he brings Mace back. He puts him on his shoulders to get him back to the LRAS. And he picks up a radio in that split moment, which helps them get back with Mace as well. And I don't know how long it took in real time, but it feels pretty much real time. And you get that lovely little bit of dialogue where he goes, "You're not dying of a gunshot wound. You're not dying of this. You're going to die of cancer. You're going to die of old age and cancer. Like, you're going to get back." And it just that little callback of them having that little moment together beforehand. And then you get my favorite shot sequence in the movie of Ty carrying the stretcher to LRAS to get Mace back. And you get another bit of great dialogue where Mace is like, they go, "You're going to be okay, Mace. You're going to be fine." He goes, "Has anyone got any cigarettes?" And that's apparently the only thing that he wanted during that time. And then, you get the emotional weight of will Mace pull through or not?
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason. I've said it all the way through. I don't care. I'll say it again. But that's another reason why the movie is different to modern war films, because real guys, real events.
And it hits super hard when they're on the chopper out and they find out.
And they're all giving him his blood. And, Bunderman breaks down Captain Portis when he comes with the relief force. And he's like, he's got all our blood in him and he pull through.
Yeah.
And he starts to break down. He says, "Not the time." So he goes, "This is the time."
Mm-hmm.
And it has that emotional weight. And it's, that was my favourite scene and favourite sequences, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great scene. And it does have that weight. And it, as I said, it hits super hard when the news comes through that Mace didn't make it.
Yeah.
And you can see,
it really does.
You can see that emotion.
I really hope that Ty was involved with either casting Caleb or mentoring him on set, because it's a really great performance in a war film, or if just not in a film. He really brings a lot of weight to the character.
Another great scene, a little bit lighter than the previous.
No problem.
Is
cheer us up a bit.
Where the Afghan interpreter comes into the CP, and he says the Taliban's are coming on us, and the guys in the CP are basically laughing. And he's like, "Are they going to come on us all at once, or are they going to line up and come on us?"
Yeah. It's great banter.
Yeah,
it's great.
But he follows that up. The Afghan interpreter says something really interesting. He's really frustrated because he can't get across what he means. And he says that the British invaded us, they underestimated us, they were destroyed. The Russians underestimated us, they were destroyed. I don't want to see you make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
Which has a lot of sort of foreshadowing. And it's a very funny scene, but it has a very interesting bit of exposition to it as well.
But he gets bollocked, doesn't he, by the American guy? He says that too. It's like, "We don't want a fucking history lesson."
Yeah,
man.
he's crying wolf.
We're not here for that.
Yeah,
you're crying wolf. Yeah, and he's like, "I'll believe." He goes, "Oh, what do you think? Do you think he's real? Or do you think he's full of shit?" Like when he leaves, and he goes, "Well, I'll believe it's true when he's running and hiding." And he does run and hide before the battle happens.
The toilet, doesn't he?
Yeah, they find him right at the end, and they sort of give knowing looks, don't they? Final thoughts, Matt?
Well, it's as you said at the beginning. I think it could well be a modern classic
Yeah,
of the genre.
I'm sticking by that.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I was struck by it. I knew you said it was good when we discussed it in that show and tell episode a few months ago. So I've been looking forward to it, and I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't realize that it was quite so effective. It does an excellent job of setting up the situation. So as you said, it gives us all that mise en scène and the feel of the guys. But then it's so well paced. It nails dialogue. There's great attention to detail. The weapons are correct. The tactics are relatively correct. It's really well shot, really well edited. Brilliant cinematography. Good cast.
Yeah.
Excellent action. Well choreographed. And it captures a real event. And it does it justice. So it's super interesting in that respect. But in sort of, it's a Last Stand movie. And
another one.
We've discussed these, a lot on the pod. But there's a lot of parallels with Zulu. Did you notice any?
Not now you mention it, yes, but not during.
So when you
watching.
think about it, it's a cut-off force. They know the enemy's coming. Inexperienced junior officer is commanding.
Okay.
It's a last stand perimeter defense. The enemy are attacking in overwhelming numbers, and they break inside the perimeter at some points. So there's lots of little. I mean, it's a complete tangent, but it's just something that occurred to me while I was watching.
I do know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it has those beats. Definitely.
But yeah, that's just something I noticed. But as I said, I think it's a really strong movie, and it combines a lot of solid elements to create something that's possibly a modern classic.
I think it is going to be a modern classic. I think it will be heralded. Looking at the reviews, be interesting to see what Sony's effort will turn out like, because they've bought the rights to Ramesh's book called Red Platoon that was released in 2016. So it'll be interesting to know how that turns out, because I know the two studios were battling each other. What one would come out first, The Outpost or Sony's?
Yeah, I hope it's still in production. I would be really interested to see. I would welcome another movie on this because it's very interesting.
Yeah, perhaps from another point of view. Solid film, paced really well, easy to watch. It's on Prime UK now. I would strongly recommend it. At the end of the movie, you get your credits, and then it goes into the real guys talking about what happened, and then the men on set, or I assume they're on set or at barracks, talking about being on the movie, and it just adds that extra sort of that extra weight to it at the end. You think, oh gosh, this actually happened. And I think that's when a war movie's doing a better job than just being a war movie. It's actually showing. It's like theirs is. It's like, I'm going to say it again. It's documenting something that actually happened, and it's going out of its way to show the audience yet again that it actually happened, and that does right by those men who survived and fought and unfortunately suffer with PTSD or post-traumatic stress to this day. It does right by them, and because it does right by them, I think that also makes it a very good film, not just from a production point of view, but it's got a lot of heart to it.
Yeah. The only thing of note really is that the timeline compress on it is quite something.
Yeah, they do.
Because Keating obviously died in 2006, so he died 3 years earlier. But it's necessary to the story to sort of give that context.
That's why Keating's called Keating.
But that's not a real criticism, and that is something that films have to do when they're retelling events.
So this week, we put out a shout on our Patreon, letting our patrons know that we were recording today. And we asked them if they had any questions that they'd like to ask us about the film or otherwise. So firstly, we have Ken Campbell. You might have seen him on the Twitter. He says, have either of you read Ramesh's book, Red Platoon? While the movie, I believe, was mostly based on Tappers, I found it an insightful and moving read.
I haven't. And I haven't read Tapper's book either.
I didn't get enough time, I'm afraid.
So that's one of the shortcomings of the pod, is that if we're covering something that's based on a book, or we don't always have the time if we haven't already read it, to read it. This is the brilliant thing about war movies, is that they capture your imagination and make you want to go away and read it. So I know
exactly.
that there are 2 books that I can go away and read. One written by one of the guys that was there, and one written by a fairly well-reputed journalist. So I haven't read them, but I think I will be.
I didn't get unfortunately, I mentioned earlier, I didn't get the opportunity to read either, but I know that they must be great reads because they've made a great film.
Yeah.
So next question. So it was David Patterson, our great supporter. I think of The Outpost as an anti-Midway movie. In Midway, the film tries to tell the whole story of the Pacific War up to the Battle of Midway, perhaps because it cannot count on the audience knowing the history. With The Outpost, we are dropped literally onto the besieged COP with almost no backstory on why it's there and what's going on around it, assuming the general public knows enough about Afghanistan not to need a lot of exposition. Would The Outpost succeed if you knew nothing about the war there? Does it matter?
I think there's enough exposition for anyone going into it blind.
Yeah,
there's just enough.
Yeah.
But I think it would do just as well. As I mentioned, it's a Last Stand movie. And people instinctively know what's going on with a Last Stand movie.
I mean, I think it matters in a sense to this movie because it's portraying real events. But if it was just a narrative piece and it was as good as it was, then I think maybe knowing any more about it would be too much. Sometimes movies can stuff in too much lore or too much world building in a small amount of time, and it sometimes doesn't pay off.
Yeah, if you don't handle exposition with a light touch, it can become a little bit overbearing at times, can't it?
I think it does enough because you get the building up with the people in the village, the Afghan people in the village. You get the building up of different CEOs, and they think something's coming on. That's an interesting question. I think that's stumped me a little bit.
I think it would work because we have enough exposition in there for you to know the context. And more importantly, it builds up the characters of the guys that we're following. And I think that's sometimes more important than exposition. Obviously, with this being a real event, then knowing the real events is important. And recognizing that it is based on something that actually happened is pretty important. But
I think you're right.
I think it would work.
Yeah, and I think to pull it into Midway does too much to show you all of it.
Yeah.
And then when it gets to those emotional beats at the end, they're almost lost because it's trying to do a complete history lesson. Whereas in this movie, you get a little bit of history from the Afghani interpreter.
And it's very guilty of timeline compress as well. Much more so than The Outpost is.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. You see, not only do you see Pearl Harbor again, but you see the Tokyo raid and all that, Doolittle's raid over Tokyo and everything. That does too much. I think The Outpost does enough. If you had a quick montage maybe of news sequences at the start, just to maybe give a little bit more extra time. But then I don't think it really needs it because it says Afghanistan in the plain text
exactly.
like they do in films.
Most people know that there is a war or has been a war in Afghanistan.
And at the moment it's in the news again. So
I think people probably have enough background. And it's kind of sad that people don't have enough background for Midway that they need.
That's the caveat, exactly. So thank you, Ken. Thank you, David, for those questions.
And thank you for patrons for helping us to decide what film to cover this month as well.
Yeah, and if you're interested in becoming a Patreon member, we're going to be running more things like this as the months go on and the weeks go on. So you can find us on Fighting on Film /Patreon. Or click through
do check
the website.
It out because there are lots of other perks available as well.
Yeah, there are goodies as well. Yeah. And we're going to be sending off for some new merch soon. So look out for that. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share on whatever you're listening on. Check out the website at Fighting on Film. We caused some absolute sizzling controversy with one of my blog posts the other day.
Yes. You knew exactly what you were doing, throwing that cat amongst those pigeons. But
no, exactly. I was stoking the film war movie fires there for everyone.
Keep an eye out for my reply next week.
Yes, Matt is going to do a rebuttal. So it'll be the fighting of the hosts. The hosts are going to have a bit of a fight. But look out for that. As always, thanks for listening, guys, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.